So welcome to our panel on accelerating collective impact across higher education networks at the annual Prime gathering. It's a great pleasure to introduce our excellent panel here today. We have Amy Hillman from Arizona State University, Ali El-Kamar, the former chairman of the African Association of Business Schools and based at HEM Business School in Morocco, Ellen Quigley from Cambridge and Vice President of the Academy of Management, and Manuel Ortiz de Zavalos, the Executive Director of Cladia. Let me start by going around our panelists to first introduce themselves and their organizations and what they are doing around this issue of rolling out the impact across higher education networks. Amy, let's begin with you, please.
Sure, happy to be here. Thank you. I'm looking forward to learning from all of you. So I represent the Academy of Management, which is 20,000 members strong. And we have multiple divisions, and one of our actually 3 of our 6 journals are focused on policy, very relevant research, and our divisions are focused along the entire continuum from basic scholarly research interests to consulting and practical activities. I also am a former board member of the AACSB, and the AACSB is one of the accrediting bodies of business schools globally. And you may be excited to hear that the new standards for accreditation for AACSB have a very large component focused on impact.
Great. And Ali, do please also introduce yourself and both your past activities and your current focus relevant to this. Okay.
My name is Ali El-Kamar. I'm the director at HEM Business School in Morocco, and was former ABS chairman. ABS is the Association of African Business Schools. I finished my term and was asked to extend it to 1 year, but unfortunately, with my responsibilities, otherwise I couldn't make it. But the idea I actually introduced at ABS is that no one network could do it by itself, all right, in the sense of making an impact. So we signed up a lot of partnerships, especially with networks and associations that share the same problems and have the same challenges, and at the same time come from rising economies, one of which was actually called an alliance. And I think, Manuel was part of this alliance with us. And it's really a great alliance of management development in the, in the rising economies, headed and initiated by Siemens. So we worked on that, and we tried to have a few things that I'll be discussing later on. But at the same time, while I was at ABS, as a member and as a board member, and at the same time as a chairman, we worked on, for the first time, having an accreditation system that is proper to Africa, what we called ACRISIS, okay? And this ACRISIS is really the future of this association, and that's what will make it sustainable. And it's based on 3 key words: relevance, impact, sustainability, right? And sustainability, in the view of the African context, is more how to stay alive. It's not just about, it's about social responsibility of schools to stay open and to survive and challenge. Face all the challenges to stay open, because a lot of schools close in Africa, and the people who actually have diplomas from these schools, they find themselves not having anything of any value after the school closes. So that's what I'm limiting myself to at this point until we get around for a second round. Thank you.
Thanks, Ali, and we'll definitely come back to those points about accreditation. But Ellen, briefly introduce yourself and your focus in this field.
Thanks. Great to be here with you all. So I'm a postdoc at the University of Cambridge. I'm a senior research associate in the Center for the Study of Existential Risk, so not the business school, but I help teach at a class at the Judge Business School at Cambridge and also guest lecture at the London Business School, both on courses called The Purpose of Finance, which is highly relevant to all of this. And I also advise the Chief Financial Officer at the University of Cambridge on responsible investment and advise the 31 colleges as well on their endowments. And so I have a particular concern about how we teach finance and how the financial system intersects with all of the things that we're talking about today.
Thanks, and a good point that we'll come back to about sort of active engagement, endowment management, as well as the teaching and the other activities of business schools. But Manuel, tell us a bit about Cladia.
Yes, Cladia, it's the first of all, it's good to see you and meet you all here, and thanks, Brian, for the invitation. Cladia, it's the Latin American Council of Business Schools. It's 50. We are 56 years old, an institution, a non-profit, and we are basically working to help the Latin American business school and universities in the administration of education, but mainly focused in society. How can we connect business schools with society? And we are working in a very strong base and foundational networking between our membership. I'm also I'm a businessman. I'm coming from the business and consulting industry personally. I'm an electronic engineer, so I'm based in my background in technology, and I'm working in Cladia a lot of initiatives around digital transformation in our institution, which I'm going to speak a little bit later in this session. Thank you.
So thanks for those introductions. Let me come back to you, Amy, for some opening thoughts. So you've both through your role at ASU, but also you mentioned the ASCSB and the Academy of Management. So you've got these multiple intersections around research, accreditation, teaching, and so on. What do you see as some of the key drivers really to escalate social impact?
I think it is a kind of a perfect storm that is not a storm, but in terms of, I guess, tailwinds that are pushing what we're trying to achieve forward very rapidly, because it seems that all stakeholders are now aligned with this. The stakeholder perspective is pretty dominant in the business schools that I'm aware of. And I know in the United States, we often are perceived as the greediest of capitalists. And I'm happy to say that in all the years I've been with AACSB, I've never seen that come out in any of the accreditation visits. So I think if that tailwind is really pushing the US business schools forward, and what we're hearing from Cladia and the African Association and new doctoral students who are coming, or postdocs coming out and teaching our students this perspective that it's really going to take hold. The other thing that I'd just like to share is that I think not only are all the stakeholders pushing for this, but all the stakeholders within individual universities and schools. Students are demanding this. They will not put up with an old curriculum that has primacy for a stakeholder, and staff and faculty don't really want to work somewhere that isn't meaningful. And I think that those things are really going to set us up very well for what we're trying to achieve.
And do you think it's the students first and foremost who are really driving this change in business schools?
It's hard to say. So I finished my PhD in '96 and was already doing research on business and society and stakeholders, and found my academic community then. So I think there's always been a segment of faculty that this is very natural for. But I think the students today are not going to let a faculty member who doesn't want to embrace this continue with an old curriculum, because they will vote with their feet. and say they don't either want to take that class or they don't want to go to school in a place where that's the, primary framing.
And Ellen, maybe picking it up from a perspective in the UK, amongst others, again, do you see it as being students who are driving a lot of this change? I mean, certainly the issue around divestment from fossil fuels, for example, very topical at the moment, and you've worked on deeply. I mean, there was a big student push around that, wasn't it? Is there a wider pressure that's coming from those current and future students who have amongst the bigger drivers of change?
Definitely is the answer to that, yes. There are extraordinary levels of pressure from students, but I think also faculty. Like I agree with basically everything that Amy has said, although I think I have more concerns, really. I think I have some optimism for the same reasons that she's laid out, but I'm more concerned because of the inertia in the curriculum, because you get a lot of faculty members who've been there for a long time, and they might be open to adding, little tendrils of ESG or something like that into their overall curriculum, but I don't see the kind of overhauling that we actually need in this time and place, and that's sort of what concerns me. And I see a lot of inclusion of really interesting electives that don't make it into the core teachings of courses. And I especially see there is a drive, especially among the business schools that are in so-called elite universities. There is more concern around the kind of career trajectory that you get out of that. So people don't feel like they can vote with their feet in the same way. They feel like they kind of have to be in these institutions for career reasons, even though I think overwhelmingly now stakeholders do prefer, both faculty and students, as Amy said, do prefer to have these factors integrated. But again, that inertia is still a really serious issue and needs to be dealt with. And that I'm really happy to hear that the new standards are going to kind of require some of this, and hopefully business school rankings as well, because I think that has a major role to play in how that's conceived of, in especially institutions that are chasing those rankings and status, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, Ali, so we'll come back to Ellen's points there about curricula and rankings, but just from the perspective of the pressure for change, again, do you see from both in Morocco and more generally the schools across Middle East, North Africa and the rest of Africa, do you see the drive for change being so strong from students or from faculty? And does it have a different form of manifestation about what social impact means? Ali, you're on mute, Ali.
Sorry. From the African standpoint, it's not really, the students have become more powerful in the power of negotiation. But we're trying to look at it from a different angle. We're trying to look at it from the leadership. Business and management education has been facing unprecedented disruption over the past few months. So businesses and educators at the same time had to think on, their feet for the short term as well as for the future. What is required in the midst of this COVID-19 pandemic is to look beyond management and get ideas and inspirations for truly innovative and future-oriented successful strategies, which can be implemented to drive forward sustainability as a key underlying theme in business education. It's not just about students wanting to add something in the curriculum or a program. This has been always a debate, whether we just looking at the certain programs and do what we call bolt-on courses to make it look sustainable, or whether we need to change the entire mindset, right? From the association standpoint, most regional academic management and business education associations play an important role in encouraging the development of sustainable mindset within their members base. So the need to consider the environmental and social impact of a project or initiative is now more important than ever, and is something which requires social awareness and a knowledge which is multidisciplinary in nature. I'm talking about a systemic change, a holistic change. I'm not talking about top bottom or bottom up or anything like that. It needs to be circular. It needs to go from different angles. So to foster this mindset and develop the relevant knowledge requires implementing a sustainability strategy which embeds sustainability within everything these associations do. I'm talking about the networks. That is why during my term as a chairman of the board at the association, we signed many partnerships, like I said, one of which had a form of an alliance. And this effort required a cross-functional internal buy-in within the members of each involved association. And when I say buy-in, I say actually the buy-in of the stakeholders that Amy and Ellen were talking about, the main stakeholders, which were faculty and students. But also, deans need to drive change. I always think of the necessity of not only change of leadership, but the necessity of a leader shift. So it's a change of a systemic change of the entire variable set of all stakeholders. Thank you.
Okay. Manuel, what about in Latin America? How far are the students, again, the real drivers and callers for change?
Well, in employability, it's a very important factor for our students in Latin America. Our culture, it's very different, difficult to understand. I mean, we have several politics environments here and economics things here in Latin America, but certainly our main goal as chiefs on our associations and networks, we have two kind of stakeholders in our networks: our inside stakeholders and external stakeholders, which means that we think that basically we are working together with deans and directors and from the business schools. They are trying to face this very aggressive environment, and they are planning, working very hard, try to change how they teach, and they foment the new leadership in their students. In the other hand, students drive a lot of questions, and they are more willing to move now because the technology helps them move from universities through university, the mobility, and now they can take decisions where to study. So they are also have a very strong power of negotiation right now, the students, against the business schools. And as Ali said, business schools in Latin America are working very strong, not to close. The sustainability of their businesses are very important today. And one of the things that we are working hard in our network, it's making them connected, more well connected. The deans, we just have a meeting an hour ago with 10 deans from 10 different universities in Latin America, and it's amazing to see how they can work together, finding solutions for the common problems. And this is a very good example of how the deans and institutions are working together in a network to face the actual problems against the needs of the students and employability needs in Latin America.
So Amy, we talked about accreditation and indeed the new focus of the AACSB, for example, around social impact. Tell us a little bit how that's beginning already, perhaps, to drive change, and whether it's triggering a sort of shift in the approach of different business schools.
I think it really is, because we changed the standards 2 years ago to start to include impact, and we did not define how to measure it. That's, I think, very, very important, because accreditation in AACSB is based on the university's mission, and it has to be relevant to that mission. So there's a lot of anxiety among deans and other visiting people that play a role in accreditation, because it's not been defined, but it was actually a very purposeful act not to say, here are the measures. There's a nice white paper that says, here are all the kinds of things you might consider as impact, but it has to be relevant to the school that you're in.
And Amy, obviously you don't speak for Equus, but we've got another set of accreditations, or two sets of other accreditations with Equus and the Association of MBAs as well. I don't know, Ellen, in the UK, for example, do you see those combined with ASCSB as really driving some aspects of this fresh focus on social impact?
This answer might put a bit of pressure on you, Andrew, but I actually see the rankings as more influential. So I think that it is not that hard to become accredited, and you're probably not going to lose accreditation on the basis of impact alone. And there are ways of recasting things that you're currently doing, such that I imagine most business schools will be able to meet standards. I really hope, I'm very pleased to hear that there are new standards coming through, and I hope that they are fairly stringent, so that is required. But I wrote a big report with my co-author David Pitt Watson on business school rankings and accreditation, and we rather concluded that the rankings have a bigger role to play for the institutions that are ranked, and those happen to be the ones that are accredited as well. That does not cover all institutions, of course, and there are other motivations for them, and I think there you're likely to see more of an influence from accreditation. But it is hard to overstate how much attention is paid to rankings among the institutions that are in the running for those. So I would see those as more influential.
All right, and I promise I'll come to rankings, but I'll just finish up on accreditation so we get round every perspective. But Ali, I mean, do you think, you talked earlier about the need for an African accreditation system. So are there a different set of values and approaches that you think are quite distinctive to that region compared to ASCSB and the other standards that are being set up in the last few years?
Yeah, I mean, the idea is not to compete or just a game of coming up of another set or another accreditation system. The idea was actually a result of 8 years of reflection and talks and debates and everything else that finished by really setting a really good accreditation system that was launched in 2018, if I'm not mistaken, in Tanzania. And the idea is we want the African schools to have a good quality education. I mean, these could be trivial to schools in England or schools in the United States or even in Latin America, but these are really, problems facing the African context. And that is giving rigorous, serious, quality education, whether it's management, business education, any higher education. And we thought of having the three powerful words of impact, and impact on Africa, not just impact in absolute terms, relevance to the African context, and sustainability in the African soil, right? And this is set to just get a state of mind of quality deliverance of knowledge and of knowledge retainment and how to measure knowledge retainment rather than just giving out lectures without any measurements, right? So we're helping actually the schools to get up to par so they can actually start competing to get ASCSBs and get the EMBAs and get the EQUISs and get to the FT rankings and everything else. But at this point in time, there are only few schools that could actually get to that level. So we're bringing up a stack of schools that will actually get to a level where they can say, now we are good at the African national football football team. Then we can actually go and compete at the FIFA level, right? And get more rigor there too. So that's the idea. What I want to go back to, and what interested me really a lot, is what Amy said, into the concentration or the focus on measuring impact. We HEM in Morocco, we're going through this accreditation system. I'm actually I got caught in my own model of accreditation, and now I am under the I'm the one to be evaluated. All right, so we are going through, and we have this standard called impact that is cross-disciplinary or cross standards, because impact is cross standards, sustainability is cross standard, and relevance is cross standard. Whatever a school does, it has to be relevant, impactful, and sustainable. And this is a really great culture in a context where some schools in Africa and universities don't have to even check their budgets. They don't have to do any budgeting, so that they get into financial problems to where that would actually threaten their sustainability over time in terms of the business model, right? So we're actually getting all these milestones together to make African schools stronger and make them deliver the best quality education there is, right? So that's the idea of this accuracy system that we're talking about.
Thanks, Ali. Just a reminder to those who are watching, we do encourage you to post remarks, reflections, questions in the chat function, and our delegates here, participants, will try to respond. But Manuel, turning to you, so tell us about Latin America. Again, do you think there's a need for a specific set of accreditations? Are there a different set of definitions of what matters around social impact and about how business schools can meaningfully engage with them?
Oh yes, we actually have partnerships with the biggest accreditation institutions around the world, and I found in Latin America the willingness to take 1, 2, or 3 accreditations, but our in some cases not every institution can apply to these programs of accreditation. We don't have like a Latin American accreditation system. Each country has their own accreditation institutions. We're more aware, I think, our institutions on how to deal with the customers. Around the rankings are important, yes, but they also are finding, instead of having accreditations, maybe badges around the world, they are more willing to make connections to other networks, and then to share value between those associations. In our case, Cladea, it's working like an airport. We are in the center, in the middle of the airport, and we have a lot of gates around us. All of those gates are networks. The network that Ali already said that we are formed for emerging markets. We are around 7 institutions like Cladea joining together, expanding, multiplying our networks by 10. It's very important. And in those gates of this airport, we have the accreditations institutions, and we translate all the value and connecting them to our Latin American institution members, but sometimes they cannot apply for this accreditation. I don't believe it's we need something for Latin America. Actually, each country are working in his environment and trying to give the best value to their students to take a job as fast as they can and to increase the leadership skills they need. That's
okay,
what
thanks. So Ellen, you raised the hot topic of rankings. Tell us a bit more about what you think needs to be done around them, if they have a purpose, and how they can best evolve.
Thanks, Andrew. I mean, rankings will be around. So I think that's I think there are people who find it difficult because they have to attend to rankings, but it's kind of not worth worrying about that too much. They will be around, and that just has to be addressed. It is difficult. I mean, as you all know very well, it's extremely difficult to attach numerical values to impact, especially social and environmental impact. Climate change is among the easier things to measure because units of greenhouse gas emissions and so on. That's actually more readily applicable to metrics that you could apply across institutions. So devilishly difficult. But at the same time, I think where I would hope we could go with this is that everyone decides to max out the points that are available in rankings that do include environmental and social impact. So I would hope that all of the ranking systems globally would adopt a strong component of that within their rankings, and then that becomes kind of one of the baseline standards. So there are some categories in which there is variability, and that's how you sort of see the dispersion among the schools that are ranked. But what I would hope would happen is that it just becomes kind of the minimum baseline that schools feel they have to achieve, and then they compete on other metrics because the environmental and social stuff is just dealt with. And that's the best case scenario for a number of reasons, not least for the environmental and social issues we might care about, but also because, as we've all mentioned previously, that is what students want. That's what faculty want. That's what deans increasingly want, and definitely what society increasingly wants, especially after a year like the one we've seen.
Amy, does that resonate with you? I mean, you said earlier the ASCSP had avoided trying to put down explicit sort of standardized metrics around social impact. So how can we move to something that's to some degree comparable and measurable?
Yeah, that is going to be the biggest challenge. I agree with Ellen. It's very hard to capture, but I don't think we need to recreate the wheel, because companies, in particular publicly traded companies, are facing increased pressure, no matter what continent they're headquartered in, to pay attention to ESG issues. Some countries and continents are much farther ahead than others, but we're seeing the push, and we'll start to be able to measure things in a more nuanced way as technology allows us to.
And Ali, what's your sense on this? Is there a value, a power, a danger of rankings, and are there some consistent metrics that we could start to put together to help nudge business schools to do more around social impact? Mute. You're on mute, Ali.
God, this is anyway. From my perspective, I mean, and I might be wrong, please correct me, but schools and deans can play with rankings, can play with things, can show that they're doing things, but they're not really doing them. They can show things, courses bolt on in programs and stuff like that, and show all this stuff and showcase things, but it needs to be ingrained in the DNA of schools. And if there were a championship in Africa about social impact, I think HEM would be a champion, honestly, and I'm not being paid for saying this, but it's really, our students are driving social change, social entrepreneurship, social impact through the projects that we give them. We have what we call ProLib, which means Project Liberating Project. In French is Projet Libérateur. These ProLibs, students go out in groups of 6 or 8 and work on different social issues, different projects, and they make immense impact that a school, our school, would not be able to do in masses. And they join associations. They help different associations with their accounting, their funding, their things, their fundraising. They do so many things. They marry couples in remote areas in Morocco. They do all kinds of stuff. And we're so proud of them. And we can bring, I mean, for any accrediting body, we can bring tons of material demonstrating all this. But whoever is actually doing the peer reviewing, they're not stupid. They're not dumb. They actually they see the difference between a state of mind of a culture of social impact, social responsibility in a school, or just a makeup, or just a showcase of some things like that. You know, that's how I look at it. And I think even in the ranking systems, there are ways to find out whether the school is really just blowing some sulfur, or is it actually doing what it's actually saying it's doing, right? So that's my view on this.
Manuel, what's your take on rankings, how important they are and what they should measure?
Well, I'm not an expert on rankings to tell you more about that, but I think the measurement of it comes from students. I mean, if students are getting the best from their universities, it will be, I think, the better measure that we will almost have. It's not depending on the infrastructure of the university or the the antique how many years it is they have, or the teachers they have. No, we need to measure the impact they are given to the society through their students. How many students are working, how many students are leading important companies, and as Ali said, how the students can find solutions for society. We are actually working at having programs in Clarea connecting students with companies, trying to make them this connection, and they found very interesting solutions. I think in that way, for the solutions they can identify and work with, we can make or measure the quality of the university or institution they are in. I think this is in my case, in my opinion, this is a very good impact factor.
So picking up on those idea of connections, Amy, so we've talked about the internal dynamics and we've talked about some of the external pressures on business schools to extend responsible management education. What about that projection externally, the partnerships, the networks, the alliances? What more do you think needs to happen to really scale up across the sector, this engagement around social impact?
I think we're making rapid progress here as well, particularly because of the global pandemic. And in many ways, the global pandemic just kind of, again, was tailwinds that were very strong, pushing us to think about this. You know, I go back to what Manuel said, employability is key for management education. And there are not companies out there that are saying, we just want to hire someone to maximize shareholder value. There might be, but they're fewer in number, hopefully, than they have been in the past. And as long as you create that interconnectivity, as Ali said, with the societal issues and companies, then that's what business education is all about. And I think that we're being pushed along again because of the pandemic and the convergence of stakeholders in a way that's really amazing.
Ali, do you want to come in on that? Well, you talked a little bit earlier on this. So what role is there collectively for business schools to drive the agenda?
The question is for me?
Yes.
So, well, actually, I'll be looking at it from a network standpoint, if you don't mind. We're looking at it. I mean, when we thought about this alliance of 7 networks, the idea of calling it an alliance rather than the association of associations spurred from the concept of the 1997 Star Alliance, one of the world's largest global airline alliances that was formed with the intent of offering customers travel benefits that no single airline could afford offering it on its own. So by working with an alliance, with other networks, we try to find some solutions to all this, to the environmental and social problems that we have in Africa and beyond. The question we asked ourselves was, what if, like airlines, regional business school associations in rising economies could find a way to cooperate to benefit their member schools and have more social and environmental impact? So what if we could create a network of associations, schools, deans, faculty members, and students in rising economies that augments the offering of regional associations and their member schools and accelerate the growth of relevant and excellent responsible management and business education in a global market that needs it? See, I see we work very closely even with Prime on this, the principles for responsible management education. I've been actually a member of steering committee of Prime for 3 or 4 years, and we were discussing all this. How can Prime drive these kind of changes through the networks by creating chapters? And I mean, they created chapters everywhere. Now we're planning on creating a chapter in Africa. I hope it's going to take off with, headed by one of the members of the board of the Association of African Business Schools. So, I mean, that's the only way, united we stand. We cannot, as a small network, make a difference, but with 7 networks, we will, because we share the same challenges, and we want our students to think responsibly. They need to be responsible and response-able. So they need to be able to respond to any challenges that they might face. Just the challenge of the pandemic that we all faced, we all got, all of a sudden, and we needed to deal with it as school leaders very quickly.
Okay,
and we are learning from all this.
Thank you. We're almost out of time, but I'd like to come back briefly to Manuel for his final thoughts around networks and alliances. And I'd also encourage anyone who's watching this session also to post their own best practices or ideas in the chat.
Sure.
But Manuel, please.
Yes, as Ali has said, we are part of this big alliance. I think one of the biggest, the winner goal here is to understand our independent objectives, our missions, and connect them and start working in a trust and a very commitment way between the associations to reach all the students from our networks in a whole in a big environment, so they can grow more, they can grow themselves globally, and digitalization helps this very good. This is where we are having an enormous opportunity now with the globalization, the virtualization tools and technology. this is the time that we can explode to connect more networks between them and explode all the benefits between the networks they have. We need to work together. Alone, we are going to not to die, but we're not going to be sustainable, I think. So
thanks very much. And Ellen, a final word, please.
Yes, just to say, I mean, we don't have time not to cooperate is the issue. I mean, we have so much to get done. We have so many urgent challenges that it would be silly for everyone to be inventing their own wheels at this stage. And, you know, I'm a millennial, the next generation, you know, Gen Z, they are going to be requiring this. But also, if you talk to any CEO, either the top consideration or at least the second to top consideration for them is where they're going to get talent that wants to work for their company and won't be embarrassed to do so. So it's, you know, every part along this chain, this is important. And the people who are feeding those you know, employment chains all the way through are coming from institutions that know how to, or should know how to, transform all of the businesses and other types of institutions in our society that need to change rapidly and dramatically in the next few years. So yeah, we have to cooperate. It's an enormous task otherwise.
So I'm afraid we've run out of time, but thank you all our panelists for a great discussion. So Amy, Ali, Ellen, and Manuel, thank you all for listening, and look forward to continuing debate on this very important issue. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here. Thanks.